So welcome everyone to this evening's Submerged Coaches Corner. I appreciate everyone signing in for another one of our meetings. We only have 4 of these this season. This is number 2. We'll have one actually at the end of the month as well, and then we'll have one in early December to finish off our season. So as always, as a reminder, we do maintain a First Nevada repository for all of our documentation. So you can find already in there this tonight's I should say tonight's recording. It'd be like in Spaceballs where they can see the movie before it's done being made. No, in that folder you'll only find the presentation slides for tonight. And once we do have the recording done, it'll end up there as well as our YouTube playlist. Other things you'll find in that folder include all of our workshop presentations. Now that I know to put the right ones in there after last weekend, I realized in the middle of the next level programming workshop that I had the wrong slides uploaded. But that got all fixed. But yeah, you can find in there any of our resources available to you to support you in terms of all of our presentation slides. And here very shortly, you'll start seeing event information put in there as well. So for tonight, here's kind of the topics I want to cover. We're going to start off with actually a handful of First Nevada reminders. We are roughly midpoint, depending on when your team started, that midpoint in the season. Then I want to talk about what milestones your team should be either at or very close to completing as you get ready for this upcoming qualifiers in just, wow, like 4-ish weeks. And the other part I want to talk about is that kind of necessary evil of putting together a team roster, which is always a challenge. Even when I was coaching, it was a day that I did not look forward to. But let's walk through it. It's gotten a lot easier since those days. So let's talk about some reminders. As we were already discussing, a lot of you are using the First Nevada calendar of events, which is great to hear. To remind everyone, the calendar of events is dynamic. So when we get information about an event, we do update this calendar with the latest information. I think at this point, we are now settled in on all of our locations. If you click on an event, if there is an associated registration form, there will be a hyperlink inside the description. If not, or in addition to, you'll see information about the time and location for the event. So if you ever are kind of curious where we're supposed to be and at what time, just click on our calendar of events, go to the red First Lego League Challenge events, and click on any of those titles, and you'll get that information associated with the event. So we have already completed a number of activities already this season. So we've had our Robot in a Day workshop. We just had our Innovation Project Coaches Clinic, as well as our Next Level Programming Workshop. Since those are all in the books, I just want to remind everyone that the documentation for it, the presentation slides, are available for you to download. So if you did miss the events, you can go back and see the presentation slides. Or if you want to go back and review something that you saw while you were there and you want to share with your students, please feel free to download those. And if you do find any errors in them, let me know, because I do try to recycle these for year after year, kind of constantly making them better. I also want to point that the Innovation Project Coaches Clinic, if you weren't able to attend that, it was recorded. It is on our YouTube playlist, as well as in the folder that I have the QR code there pointed to. At this point, we don't have, I shouldn't say, we do have one more workshop to go. So I was going to say we're all done with the workshops. We don't. We actually have one more to go. Looking forward, the next major event on the calendar is our Learn and Play scrimmages. They're coming up on October 19th, and that will be everywhere in the state on that same day. We'll be in Elko in the afternoon. In Las Vegas and Reno, we have dual scrimmages, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. The morning Las Vegas scrimmage is full, so I did have to turn off the enrollment for that, but we still have space in the afternoon session. So you can register your team by following that QR code. Now, I do want to talk a bit about the format of the Learn and Play scrimmages. I purposely use the terminology Learn and Play to kind of remind everyone that the idea behind these scrimmages is that your team shouldn't be ready or polished in terms of its innovation project or its robot itself. You really come out and use this as a learning time. It's basically a very fluid, dynamic workshop environment where what we're going to do is give you the opportunity to have your team do some time matches at the robot game table, and they'll be able to interact with referees to ask questions, to get clarification. So there's a lot of opportunities for some dialogue there. As well as we want to talk to you about judging and the different aspects of judging. So we'll have some topics and coverage there. Depending on where you're at in the state, you'll see a little bit different format. In the South, where our scrimmages are a bit on the larger side, we'll have classrooms off to the side for the judging portion. But if you're in the North, you might see it all done as a group, just because we'll have some smaller scrimmages up there. In terms of preparing and bringing your team to it, basically bring your robot as is, even if it still needs some building or some programming. This is a great opportunity to kind of refine and tweak that. We'll hopefully have some volunteers being able to float through the pits as well to help your team. You do not need to bring anything for your innovation project, your robot design, or your core values. We will be there providing you some activities and ways to think about those judging. It's not for you to have to present at that time. So don't think that you have to be ready to compete at the day of the scrimmage. We do call it a learn and play scrimmage because we do want you to come out and learn something from us, as well as the opportunity to play. So don't think of it as an athletic scrimmage where it's kind of a simulated game. Here it's really just an open-ended kind of sort of workshop environment where we'll be providing some feedback to you, some information, and giving your team some opportunities to do some robot game runs, as well as ask questions about judging. So I do encourage you to come out. It is a great event. Each of our scrimmages are only 3 hours. So if you're coming to the morning scrimmage in Las Vegas or Reno, it's from 9 to noon. And if you're coming to any of our afternoon scrimmages, they are from 1 to 4. Again, we do ask you register ahead of time, so we have some counts and expectations. So follow that QR code there, put it on the screen to let us know that you are coming. As a reminder, we do have the qualifier registration form active right now, and a lot of you have signed up for it. I think we're at somewhere around 130 teams now have already signed up for a qualifier. If you have not signed up for your qualifier, we do need you to do so as soon as possible, ideally and expectedly before October 19th. That's, of course, the same day as the scrimmage. We want to make sure and finalize all of our assignments at that time. Do remember that you cannot sign up for a qualifier until your team has paid their $150 season fee to First Nevada. As part of the registration process, you have to enter in the authorization ID, which is a number found on the receipt after you paid your First Nevada season fee. So do make sure you get that one, fee paid, and two, get registered for a qualifier. Now, we do have limited capacity at all of our qualifiers, so we do close them once we reach that capacity. I know in the South, the November 16th one is full, so I have closed the registration for it. The November 23rd one in the South is getting very close to being full, so if you intend to participate in it, make sure you're signing up as soon as possible. There's plenty of room for the November 9th ones. Not really surprised there, but just as a reminder, that first qualifier, there's plenty of room. As a coach, I always love competing at the first one. Everyone's in the same boat, and it also gives you more time to prepare for the state championship should your team move on. So don't be afraid of that first one. I do hope you might take advantage of participating in those ones. But I do want to remind everyone, we do need you to sign up for your qualifier by October 19th. I need to know where you would like to compete, and so that we can get our final numbers in place for our volunteers, as well as starting to make our schedules. When it comes to qualifiers, I will be sending out a confirmation email early next week to let those teams who have signed up know that they are finalized and for sure being in the qualifier. But in all honesty, the only reason you won't get in the qualifier that you signed up for is we find out you didn't pay your season fee. So we're not going to go and use it any other reason to reject you from going to the qualifier you signed up for, other than if you haven't paid your season fee, we will drop you from the one you signed up for. Which I do, and I keep saying it, but I do want to emphasize what that season fee is and where it's coming from. To remind you of a discussion we've had in our prior Coaches Corner, there are two first entities involved with the delivery of the program. There is what we call First Headquarters. They're based out of New Hampshire. They're the ones that come up with the game and the theme every year. They're the ones that define the standards for delivery. Your team has to pay First Headquarters a $250 registration fee. And of course, that gets your team officially recognized as competing this season. It also is how you get your engineering notebooks and your robot game rule book sent to you. And it gives you the opportunity to buy a challenge set. That is paid again to Headquarters, and that's the $250 fee you pay to them. First Nevada is a separate parallel entity. We are responsible for delivering the game in the state of Nevada. So we have to host our workshops, our coaches corners, we have to buy our equipment, and then we have to pay for our venues, custodial, our volunteer food, and all the other supporting items that comes with running the events. To make that possible, we do charge our teams $150 season fee. So we do call it a season fee as opposed to a registration fee to kind of distinguish the two. So I know it gets confusing because both of us go by the name First, just we have the name Nevada as part of it. So we are two separate nonprofits, and we do require you to make two separate payments in support of either the development and of the game itself, and then separately the delivery of the game here locally. Now, how we handle our invoices and our season fee collection is once you register with Headquarters, we pull your lead coach contact information from the First database, and then we contact the lead coach and send them an invoice. We're basically doing that on a rolling process at this point. So if you have been registered or for a while, you should have already received these invoices. Within the invoice, you can click on a payment button, and it'll take you to an option where you can pay with it by credit card, which is the easiest way. Since it's all done automatically, electronically, you will instantly, hopefully pretty quickly, get a receipt. And on that receipt is that authorization ID that you need to register your team. Let's see, there's something I want to add to that. Nope, okay, I'm good. Just make sure that you made those payments as soon as possible, because that is what's going to prevent you from registering for your qualifier. Now we're getting up to the point where our volunteer coordinators aren't quite sweating it, but they are starting to think about, do we have enough volunteers for our event? And I do want to remind you that one of the best ways to improve as a coach is to volunteer as a judge at an event. So we do have events spread across 3 consecutive weekends. And it'll be a great opportunity for you as a coach to develop your skills by coming out and volunteering to judge at an event you're not competing at. So if you are one of those brave teams that's competing on November 9th, come out and judge on the 16th and 23rd. That give you an opportunity to learn more about what happens behind the curtain. You get to meet the wizard yourself and find out what it's like through the judging process. What do we look for as judges? How do we deliberate and think about all the things that happen behind the scenes? You also have the opportunity to meet a lot of other teams in the area. And so you might get some ideas about ways to maybe present differently, have your team present differently, or also get some insight into what the judges are thinking about as they're interviewing the teams themselves. If you're interested and available to volunteer as a judge, the way you do that is you sign into your First dashboard, and there is a button in there for volunteer registration. And once you get on that button, you'll see a screen on the similar to what I show on the right, where you can search for First Lady League Challenge events in your area. Click on the events that you would like to volunteer at and follow the instructions on the screen. Doing so really helps our volunteer coordinators sleep at night when we know that we have plenty of judges to help facilitate all that judging that's necessary. If you're interested in refereeing, that too is available. So please fill that out as well. Or if maybe you only have a half day or limited time, but you still want to volunteer, we have positions available for you as well. But again, one of the best ways to learn more about the First LEGO League Challenge program is to get involved from the volunteer side and seeing how it's ran from behind the scenes. We would really appreciate it if you can do that as well, because it does make our events run smoothly. Last thing I want to mention as a First Nevada reminder, you should have seen your first of your monthly tongue twister, monthly coach check-in questionnaire come in. This is meant to be a very brief survey. It's just a pulse check to make sure you're still making it through the season. We just kind of give you a handful of questions, kind of get a feel for how you're feeling right now. Are you highly stressed with what's going on? Are you feeling cool as a cucumber? Are you making it through just no problem? Do you have a lot of waves in your ocean, or is it smooth sailing for you? Just to kind of get some feedback and give us an opportunity to answer your questions that maybe you haven't been able to ask elsewhere. So just if you wouldn't mind filling out those questionnaires when they come in your inbox, that gives us some feedback about how you're feeling and what we can do to help you better. So please do take some time to fill that out so we know how things are going. Well, I'm going to take a pause here. Please feel free to ask some questions. You can throw it in the chat, which I see a couple are in there, or if you like, you can unmute and just let us know what's on your mind up to this point. Can't do it. So I'm reading. Is there any questions that I need to stop and address here?
I think at the moment we've hit them all in the chat, so I think you're okay.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, as I said, we're, depending on how you measure it, about halfway through this season. If you started maybe in early September, knowing you have a November qualifier coming, we're about that halfway point. So what I want to do is stop and kind of do a checklist of where should your team be at the moment as you progress towards those qualifiers coming up in a few short weeks. Well, at this point, you should have a built robot. It doesn't necessarily have to be the final robot. It doesn't have to have all of its attachments. Maybe you're going to change some things here or there. Definitely doesn't have to have all the programming done. But at this point, your team should have some sort of built robot that is starting to get programmed to solve the submerged missions. So if you are behind a little bit on that, I do have a couple of resources here I put on the screen. On the left, the QR code to the LEGO one, that will take you to instructions on how to build either the advanced driving base, which is that larger robot on the left, or maybe the smaller driving base, like the one we did during our Robot in a Day workshop. Those are great starting foundations for making a very competitive robot. On the right are some alternative designs that you could build. They're available through the Prime Lessons website. If you go into the robot design section there, they have some ideas for other types of robot designs. Do keep in mind that you're not required to have any specific type of design for your robot. Your team is allowed to build anything it wants as long as it fits within the parameters of the launch area on the submerged map. So you can creatively come up with your own design, but I would not encourage that this late in the season unless you're already working along something creative already. So if your team maybe hasn't built the robot yet, I would definitely suggest one of these sort of designs I have here on the screen. They're very competitive, and they do a great job as a foundation for getting you through the season. So I just want to make sure everyone at this point kind of has some sort of functioning robot available to them, so your team can work on actually developing some solutions to the missions themselves. Speaking of the missions, you definitely should be at the point where all of your missions are built. Coaches, you should be doing some quality control to make sure the missions are built correctly. So from our perspective, we have our missions built by our volunteer experts, and then we double check them to make sure they're all built and functioning as specified. You too should have your missions checked. So coaches, you should go through and check all of them. At this point, you really should have all of your missions built. If you are following along with the team meeting guide / engineering notebook, you do build them in your first meeting or two with the team. Don't forget that the missions are not just random. They are designed to kind of give you a learning opportunity to learn more about this year's submerged theme. So each mission also has a story to it. and a lot of teams are using them as a springboard to studying something related to their innovation project. And it really is helpful that as your team is building these mission models, that they think about what is the story that these missions are telling, how is it related possibly to your innovation project, and getting the students to think about those connections, as well as trying to figure out how do you actually solve those missions using an autonomous Lego robot. As a quick reminder, on the bottom right, there is a QR code that does take you to the website where you can get the build instructions. If you happen to be missing any Lego pieces as well, that same section has some information about who to reach out to get those parts. Yeah, and as Kim said, yes, check your missions. Otherwise, it might be used as a workshop and you learn that something isn't right. Yeah, so last weekend we had to borrow one of her team's mission models and it wasn't quite functioning as expected. But it was also shame on us because we, for some reason, that was the one mission we were missing. The other thing your team should be at this point experts on is the robot game rulebook. I've said this before, coaches, you should read the rulebook at least once, if not twice, through to understand what it covers and where it is within the book. The students really should be the experts here. They're the ones that are going to be at the table running the robots themselves. They're the ones that's going to be having the conversation with our referees. So they're the ones that really need to be the experts on what's happening in this book. The thing is, this book covers not only the missions themselves, but it also covers what happens before, during, and after a match. So as your team is building that robot and programming it, it might come up with a very innovative, creative way to solve a mission, but it may not be legal. And so you definitely want to make sure you're reading through this robot game rulebook to follow all the rules that are described in it. At the Learn and Play scrimmage, you'll have an opportunity in person to talk to our referees and our head referees to find out what exactly is legal and not legal if you're kind of unsure of something. You're also encouraged to use our Facebook and our Slack outlets as a way to ask questions too. We've had a great conversation in Slack, a couple of them now, about clarification related to rules or possible ways to build the robot. So you do have some ways to reach out to us and let us know, hey, my team is thinking about this. Is it legal? And we can either point you to where the rules say it, or we can discuss why it will or will not be a legal approach. But my point here, the robot game rulebook, everybody should have read it multiple times. Coaches, you should be familiar with it. Your students should be experts on it at this stage in the season. Now, a little secret about how this works. First is constantly developing or implementing up to 3 challenges at a single moment. Right now, of course, we have the Submerged season going. They're currently working on next year's materials, and they're also fleshing out what exactly 2 years from now is going to be. And so they're constantly bouncing around, thinking about 3 different challenges. What ends up happening, of course, is these creative teams come up with these very innovative, weird ideas, and they become loopholes that we never thought of as the game is being developed. As a consequence, First has to publish challenge updates to let everyone know, hey, we have to clarify something that was specified either in the robot game rulebook or in the engineering notebook. These challenge updates are official rules, so it's assumed that everyone is also reading them just as much as they read that robot game rulebook. There's now, 3.5 pages worth of updates. They do span both the robot game and the innovation project, so you definitely want to make sure you're reading through those. The QR code there on the screen will take you to them. You should periodically, probably about once a week, check in on this link to make sure there has been no updates. First does a great job when it messages teams about it. We also quickly share out on Slack and Facebook whenever we see an update come through to remind teams, do make sure that you are aware of these updates and that your team is adjusting their game to address them. So at this point in the season, your team hopefully has started completing a couple missions. If you've come to our Robot in a Day and our Next Level Programming Workshop, we did focus on that mission 9, the unexpected encounter one. So that one, hopefully your team is well versed on. As I'll talk about in a moment, there is also a guided mission as well that your team could have been working on. But I do want to make a couple comments related to the missions themselves. First off, they are numbered, but the numbering scheme doesn't mean you have to do them in a certain order. It also doesn't mean you have to do all of the missions. Your team gets the choice of which missions it wants to complete and in what order it wants to do that. One of the things you should be practicing with your students is having them, as they're running the robot at the table, thinking about if they can go out and do mission 9, but the robot just doesn't quite complete it as expected, do they repeat try it, or do they move on to the next one? So they start getting through that what if scenarios and thinking through all the conditions of what should they do while they're moving that robot or setting that robot up. Do they want to repeatedly go after the same mission? Do they want to do a whole sequence of missions? You should be thinking about your strategy just as much as developing the solutions to the missions right now. So again, I just want to emphasize, even though there are 15 missions in the Submerged Challenge, your team does not have to do all 15 of them, and you don't have to do them in the order that they're numbered. You really do get the choice of which missions you want to solve in what order. Now, do keep in mind you're allowed to launch from either side of the board, so you can launch from the left quarter circle or the right quarter circle. But once the match starts, you cannot pass the robot back and forth. You have to let the robot travel between launch areas on its own. Otherwise, it would be a penalty. So keep that in mind as well as you think about your strategy. Other thing is, how many missions should you aim for? Well, if you're a rookie team, 2 to 3 mission completions is great. If you're a more veteran team, maybe you want to aim for 5, 6, or 7 missions to be completed. And then also you want to think about how reliable is your robot in completing those missions. So think about working with your team about tabulating some data to find out what is the reliability of your robot and share that with the judges during robot design. So that gives you some idea of some feedback mechanism that your team is using to continuously develop the robot. If they find out it's only completing the missions 30% of the time here in mid-October, they make a change to the robot, it improves it, so it's now completing the mission 70% of the time. That is something to share with the judges. You collected some data, you figured out a way to improve your robot, and it did in fact improve the robot based on the data. Judges want to hear that sort of thing. So as you're working through the mission solutions right now, think also about ways to collect information that your team will use to improve its robot design in moving forward through the season. As I alluded to before, a reminder that within the Spike app, there is a guided mission for this year. And as it has been for a number of years now, it is the cooperation mission. So in this case, it is that a mission where the submarine is straddling across the 2 boards that send over the submersible mission. Within the Spike app, there is some guidance on how to complete that mission. You may have to come up with a creative way or an attachment to engage the mission model itself. Maybe you use one of the gates designed there inside the Spike app. But your team can also be working on this as well. It does include the guided missions program itself. So your team could adopt that program, maybe tweak it a little bit to improve it. But just remind you that your team has access to a completed mission within the Spike app. So if you couple that with the unexpected encounter that we did at the Robot in a Day and Next Level Programming workshops, your team should hopefully already have 2 missions in the bag with maybe a 3rd or 4th already in development from what your team has come up with. So I just want to remind teams about this mission, that it is available for you to work on, with a lot of the work already being done by the software and what is shared within it. So besides the robot game, your team should be also working on the innovation project as well. So last Tuesday, we had our innovation project coaches clinic. If you were unable to make that, that's okay. We have shared those slides as well as the recording from it. So you're welcome to go to our YouTube channel and go back and review that innovation project coaches clinic. But for tonight's purposes, I just want to remind everyone that your team should be working on the innovation project right now. This is not something that can be put off to late in the season, that to do an effective version that will please the judges, you definitely do need to work on the innovation project throughout the season. Now, the idea behind the innovation project is there is an opportunity for your teams to use the engineering design process in addition to how you use it with the robot game itself. The innovation project is set up so teams have to first identify a problem. This year, of course, with the theme of submerged, is a problem faced by people that explore the oceans. So it's a very specific problem your team should be investigating. Once they have kind of thought about what that problem might be, they need to research the problem and kind of come up with an idea for a solution to that problem. They then are going to design and create a solution that would help people who explore the oceans. They then, and this is the crucial part, they need to share their idea, collect some feedback, and make an iterative improvement to their solution. And then finally, of course, when they get to the event, they're going to communicate their solution with the judges there. But that step here is a crucial one, and especially at this midpoint in the season, is that you need to have enough time to go out in the community, collect some feedback, use that collected feedback, and make changes to your innovation project solution and document it so your team can share it with the judges in a few weeks. And this is I really highlight this step because this really shows how the season is spread out, that you can't really do the innovation project there at the very end in the last week, because you do need some time to do some research. You need to do some time to develop an idea for a solution, then follow through on creating that solution, taking that solution outward into the community, get some feedback, and then iteratively improve on it. This is a multi-step process. It does take some time. And so I just want to make sure your team is working on it as it progresses through the season. So the last workshop, and the one I forgot about for just a moment, in the South, we have one of our veteran teams going to again host what we call the Innovation Project Sharing Night. This will be on Monday, October 28th, from 5:30 till 8 p.m. During this fun little activity, what we do is we gather up some FLL teams, and they come in and we have them talk to each other and talk to adult judges as well as experts in the field to share with everyone what their innovations project is and kind of what their solution is at the moment. The idea here, though, is that the teams do not need to have a final polished solution nor presentation. They really only need to come in really with an elevator speech ready to go. Maybe if you have a prototype or a model in some form or fashion, you're welcome to bring it along, but it's not a requirement. This is a great opportunity to go out there and share, just as the rubrics require. And this is an opportunity to get feedback on your innovation project so that you are making those iterative changes in response to feedback you collect. We do ask the teams register for this and do have the QR code on there. Again, it's Monday, October 28th. It goes from 5:30 until 8. We'll be at Cannon Junior High School, which is in the middle of Las Vegas. It's really close to the airport, so it's kind of within everybody's reach to some extent. We've been doing this for a couple of nights, and I shouldn't even say we. I really do want to give a shout out to the coaches that were formerly at Red Rock Elementary, John Guerrero and Ron White. They've done a wonderful job of developing this idea, which is carried on from an old coach, Rachel, who was doing this a number of years ago. And now we're kind of, as First Nevada, helping them share this out. So I would really encourage your teams, if you're available, come out and share on this. Kim's asking, do we need to stay for the whole time? I would say ideally you should, but we do recognize it is a weeknight. So if you do need to duck out a little bit early, that's somewhat understandable. But since there's going to be a lot of discussions between teams, we want to make sure everyone has an equal opportunity to have that discussion. So if you can plan to be there the whole night, that would be ideal. A last reminder about this mid-season kind of checklist is We're getting to that point where if your team is going to have some sort of team shirts, or if they're starting to do that team identity and you need to order some items for it, it's about that time you want to make sure that order has been placed, because it sometimes takes a few weeks to get it complete. So this is about that time in the season. You definitely want to put your final orders in for maybe your t-shirt designs, or if you're going to have some pit decorations, or if you're going to find some funny hats. This is that time of the year that you really maybe should be placing those orders to make sure they're here in time for the qualifier events in a few weeks. Also a reminder that the shirts are a wonderful opportunity to recognize any sponsors your team has gotten. So if you want to put them on your shirts in some manner or fashion, incorporate that into your design as well. So just a reminder, this is that time of year to make those orders. Also, I do want to emphasize your team is not required to do this. Nowhere is there a measurement or assessment of how cute your team is. We do want them to apply the core values, of course, but they don't need to have a colorful shirt. If it's just not in your budget, we understand. But I do want to say that a lot of teams do this. It does make the event fun to seeing all those colorful shirts and the identity that the teams are getting behind. It does make the event kind of unique, but it is not a requirement. But I just want to remind everyone, it's about that time of year. If your team is going to be doing some sort of shirts or other sort of team recognition, now's the time to place those orders. All right, I'm going to pause here, make a check to see if there are any questions. Again, feel free to put them in the chat or to unmute yourself and let me know what your thoughts are. Cam, I see you're blowing up the chat, but it looks like all your your stuff is getting answered. All right, well, I want to talk about our last section, which is making a team roster. So it is a requirement that every team submits a team roster when they come to our qualifying and championship events. This is what we use to verify that the team, in fact, has 2 YPP screen coaches and that all of the students have a consent release on file for them. So it's very important that you do complete this team roster. Before we get there, I just want to remind you that when we put together our schedules, that we do pull your team's kind of title, their team name. We pull that from the first system. And I have, as part of the registration forms for various events, been reminding you of updating this. But I just want to talk about it formally. How do you update your team name? Well, you go to the team dashboard under the First Inspires website. You'll go on the far left there where it's under team options. When you click on the drop-down menu from team information, you can update the team profile. And the very top option under the team profile is the name of your team. So I do encourage you, if your team is thinking about changing their name, do it as soon as possible so that when we pull our reports about your registered team information, that we get the most accurate title for your team. That is the team name that we'll be using within our schedule and also will be put on the scoreboard at the event. So definitely about that time of year, again, to finalize what your team name is. You do not have to use a team name from your prior year. You do not have to have a team name related to your school or affiliation. It's really up to you what you want to call your team, as long as it's appropriate for our audience members. You can change it whenever. I'm asking you to probably make that change and finalize it here in the next few days so that when we start pulling that team information in preparation for our schedule making, that we have the best team name for you. It's kind of a bummer when you show up to the event and your team has been thinking they've been calling themselves such and such, and then you get to the event and we find out it's just the name of your school is up there. So to make sure that you're having that fun and incorporated part, just make sure you've updated your team name within the first dashboard. As an other reminder, before you start making your team roster, teams are limited to between 2 and 10 youth members that are in grades 4 to 8. This is kind of important in two aspects. One is we want to make sure you have the right number of kids on your team. It has to be at least 2, and it cannot be more than 10. If you bring in more than 10 students to an event, it is grounds to be disqualified, and your team wouldn't be eligible to earn a trophy. So we want to make sure that you finalize your team roster in the next few weeks. So you identify who are those kids who are going to represent your team. And it can be up to 10 members. And it's really your choice of where it falls in that range. It's just as long as it's a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 10. As for the age range, that's also important to note. There is a hard upper limit that the students cannot be older than 14, but this under the lower limit is a softer limit. So we do publish that students need to be at least 9 years old. In reality, we do kind of allow 8-year-olds into the program, and we really leave that up to the discretion of the coach. If you have a mature student who is contributing to your team in a positive way, then by all means, please include them. The tricky part, as you'll see in a moment, is the first system kind of limits the inclusion of a 9-year-old electronically, so you do have to include them in your roster using a paper form. So how do you actually make a roster? Well, it's all done through the first dashboard. When you get to the event in a couple of weeks, we're going to ask you to turn in a hard copy of your team dashboard. You're going to turn in a hard copy of your team roster. That roster has a standardized format that comes straight off of the first dashboard. From it, we can quickly see your team number, your team name. We can see, do you have 2 coaches that have passed the YPP screening, and have they completed their consent and release? And then we can also see, have the youth members associated with your team also completed the consent and release as well. So you'll turn this in at the beginning of your qualifier during the team check-in. If your team progresses to the state championship, we'll collect a second one at that time as well. This is printed off directly from your first dashboard. So after you follow the steps I'll discuss here in the next few moments, once you have your team put together in the first dashboard, there is a print button that prints this out for you. Okay, so there are instructions available to you because this gets a little confusing, and there's a couple options for how do you make your team roster. And I do want to point you to 2 of the best resources we have. One is the Youth Registration System Overview. I have the QR code on the top left there. That will take you to the page you see on the right. And there's a lot of collapsed menus here, each of them with a specific purpose. Some of them aimed at you, the coach. Some of them is a resource to share with the parents. And that takes me to the second QR code in there. There is a section to help the parents help complete getting their student registered within the first system, having them complete the consent and release for their student, their kid, and having them added to your roster. So if you're confused about the steps, I do want you to kind of come to this website first, check out the guides that are there that walk you through either from the coaching perspective or as well as the parent perspective on how you build the team roster. Now, the old-fashioned way, which is still available, is that you as a coach would go into your team roster, your first dashboard. What you would do is you would send an invite to all the kids' parents by email to have them register their kid with the first system and then have them added to your roster. So it's a back and forth steps where what you do is step 1 is you would email all of your parents through the first dashboard. They would then receive a automated email from First instructing them to register their kid. They register their kid with the first system, and then you as a coach can go back in the third step and accept that the kid has now fully completed their consent and release and they are available to join your roster. It's a little bit of back and forth, and this is the old system. It's still available to you. However, it has been replaced with the now new express enrollment, which works a lot quicker and a lot easier. With express enrollment, what you do is you first go into your team dashboard. And what you do is you go into your team contact section, and you go into the express enrollment section. And what it does is it generates a QR code for you. And there's two ways you can use this. One is you could, in theory, email this QR code to your parents, and they will then fill out the information on the website that the QR code leads to. An alternative and very easy way to do this is when the kids are picked up, have the QR code ready and have the parents scan it right there with their cell phone, and they can actually complete the form within a minute or two. That's the idea behind express enrollment. It really is meant to be a quick, rapid way for the parents to complete the consent release for their kid and get them added to your roster. That magical QR code gives them all the key information about getting the kid involved, getting them registered on first, and associating them with your team. So by far and away, this is the easiest way to do it. Again, what you do is you go to your first dashboard for your team, go onto the team contact section, go under the express enrollment, and generate your QR code, which you can then either print or you can send to your parents. They will then follow that QR code and get their kid registered with First and added to your team roster, all in one quick, rapid step. But you do need to do this in the next few weeks prior to your qualifier. We do not need it for the scrimmage, but we will be collecting your rosters for the qualifier. Again, one of the best ways, and I do highly suggest this, is to actually have your parents come join a team meeting. Maybe invite them to the last 5-10 minutes of the meeting, and then just have the QR code ready and ask them to scan it on site. Or alternatively, you can just have them use one of your computers related to your team, and that'll allow them to actually get their students enrolled and ready and added to your team roster right there and then. That way you don't have to go back and forth with them through email, track them down, and find out how can we get this updated. So I do suggest, planning for it, that it will take a little bit of work to get your team roster done. Using express enrollment, it will be done a lot faster and a lot quicker, and that should work pretty well. I see in the chat, I've sent the invites to parents, and many of them can't find the email. So that would be a question about, is the email ending up in their junk? Alternatively, what you could do, as I said, is you could print the QR code out using express enrollment and put on hard copy. And you can send it either home with their kids or have them come pick their kids up and scan it there on site. Or you can incorporate the QR code in an email you write to the parents as well. So there's a couple workarounds in that case. All right, I am at the end here. Actually, I'm at the end of all my presentation for today. So if you have any questions, please let me know. You're welcome to unmute and ask away.
Rubo, I have another suggestion for registering students.
Please.
At least in CCSD down here in the South, I know parent teacher conferences are Monday. So if you can, like, I'm a specialist, so I might just send a message and ask the parents when they come for conferences to stop by and see me, because I'm going to be doing something else. But for those that are teachers, they could always see if when their team comes to conferences, do they have an open time where they could catch the parent before or after conference and do it then?
In all my years, I've never heard that suggestion. It's a brilliant idea.
I literally just thought of it because I was like, what am I doing all day Monday but sitting at a community fair that all of my parents are probably going to walk past me for their conferences. So I can try to catch as many of them during conference time as possible.
The other time that teams tend to gather is when they drop their kids off at workshops in the scrimmage. Would be another time that you interact with them a bit. Yep. Good. That's a good idea. All right. Are there any other questions or suggestions, or if you want to share best practices, open the floor to you. Nothing. Well, I can say we're getting excited on our end, seeing teams at our workshops lately, seeing the energy, excitement for this season. As we're finalizing our venues, I just ordered the trophies this week, so we'll have those. It's all coming together. We're getting really excited, so close to actually having the competitions here in just a few short weeks.
Can you clarify what the division is between the upper or north and south Nevada groups? Because it looks like there's just a north championship and a south championship.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we basically use geography to divide the state. So we take the southern school districts, which is basically Clark and Nye for the most part in the south, and then we take all the northern school districts. And we have 3 qualifiers in both the south and the north. In the south, all 3 of the qualifiers are in the Las Vegas Valley area. In the north, we have a qualifier in Reno, a qualifier in Carson City, and then a qualifier in Elko. And the idea is that if you participate in, say, one of those 3 qualifiers, say Carson City, Reno, or Elko, you have the opportunity of advancing to a state championship. And then we have 2 of those. We have a state championship just for the north, and we have a state championship just for the south. So it's not really quite accurate to say a state championship. It's more like a regional championship event is what we have. And then, so you will only compete with those teams that are in your region of the state. And basically, it's more or less Las Vegas and Pahrump in the south, with, of course, Mesquite and Laughlin and a few others. And then the north is everybody else. The next Coaches Corner on October 29th, which is 3 weeks from now, we'll go into more depth about the advancement process, how many teams will be advancing from each of the qualifiers, and moving on to a state championship. As a rough rule of thumb, it's about 30% of the teams will move on to the championship. It's a good question. Now that I think about it, we really don't define north and south anywhere publicly. It's all behind the scenes. Yeah.
One more question, Rubo, about if you sign up to volunteer.
Okay.
Do you just have to do the volunteering with FIRST training, or do you need to do the coaching and mentoring and the FIRST data privacy and protection? Do you know?
It depends on your role. So if you're just going to do something as simple as, say, queuing, I don't want to trivialize it, but if you're going to be queuing, that is a pretty straightforward role and doesn't really require too much training. If you're going to be a referee or a judge, then you would need to do more training, and that is done through our Blue Volt system online. And you would be doing then the FIRST headquarters training as well. And that would include data privacy, because you may be privy to some information there as well. Yep. It shouldn't take that long. I did the data privacy one, and it was pretty quick.
Yeah, none of them looked that long. I just didn't know because the roles I selected was, of course, wherever you want me, but then like judge and referee. But I just didn't know if I had to do all 4 courses or just the volunteering, or just, I can't remember from when the last time I volunteered which ones I had to do.
So the most important one for me is do the judging one, and then that would have the required ones that precede that. So that would be the data privacy one as well. I think they force you. It always changes.
Well, when I signed up, because I just signed up, and it's, it sent me to the dashboard to do trainings, but it didn't assign me anything. I had to select them. And like I said, they just have coaching and mentoring with FIRST data privacy and protection, remote mentoring with FIRST, and volunteer with FIRST. I thought there was a specific one that says judging, but I can't find one that's like judging training on the Blue Volt website. There's just
That's
the 4
interesting.
under courses.
Yeah, I'm having these discussions with headquarters. You may need to be assigned to a judge to see that training. I'm still trying to get clarification from them about this.
And that might have been what happened last time, is that when I was assigned my because last time I volunteered, I was a judge, and it might have been when I was assigned as a judge, I got a notification saying, hey, there's a training you need to do before the qualification.
Yep.
So maybe that was it. That was like 2 seasons ago. I'm lucky if I remember what happened last week.
I've been having discussions with headquarters themselves, trying to get me trained. And it was a lot of back and forth on it. Yeah. Scott, Southern Nevada's Clark Esmeralda. Yeah. Good. Well, we're almost at an hour. I'll stay on as long as there is any more questions. But thank you everyone for attending this Coaches Corner. Hope to see you in a week and a half at a scrimmage. And then in 3 weeks, October 29th is our next Coaches Corner. And that one, of course, we'll talk more details about the actual qualifying event and what it's like to attend that. So thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and see you soon.